Cool. So, hello everyone. My name is Banjo Biami. I'm a senior developer advocate at AWS, and I love building apps and talking to people about cool new apps I've built. So, we're going to talk about Web3 today. So, before we can answer like what exactly is Web3, it's good to get some historical content of how the web has evolved. So, I like to think of Web 1.0 as information. So this is like early 1990s. I used websites really were about conveying information to the users. So think of like the Space Jam website promoting the movie, or any video gamers would use CC to get information on video games. So it's really about how can I get this information, and you can think of it as read only. So I'm the developer, I have the website, and I'm going to put information for people to read. And you can think of it as like static HTML styling. So this is the example from the Space Jam site. It's just very poorly formatted HTML. Yeah, very, very simple, very just style. I just want to read only. So the pain point of Web 1.0 is there's really no interaction. So we've already mentioned I'm just reading this information. Databases were probably still in their infancy, and then there was that many standards of actually building stuff. So it's really the wild, wild west of web development. You know, some HTML, you can get like a six-figure job and do something crazy, but then it's probably bad spaghetti code that crashed. And that's what really brought on kind of the Web 2 after the .com crash. So as standards evolved, more people had access to phone, internet was better. We really think of this Web 2.0 of information and people. So how can we scale out the internet so other people can utilize it and create content or make a living off it? So think of big companies like Facebook, Uber, very user-generated content. Users really drive the platform. The platform's created and the users kind of just take over, and things get built from that. So you can think of Web 2 as dynamic, interactive, and social. So people are really part of that, able to utilize these systems better technology. And when the platform is really the focus, and you have that cool UI, and you can really focus on that user experience. So companies providing the platform really focus on a nice user experience that users can just utilize and build systems or content on top of that. And then some of the pain points, the monetization is really skewed for the platform. So the platform is generating a lot of money, but those individual users probably aren't getting the lion's share of the profits. This also introduces security issues, where since it's a very centralized platform, if a breach happens and all that data is leaked and people use it, I'm sure people's data has been breached plenty of times through all the hacks over the years. And that really suits to the point of the centralization. The company, the platform in charge really has control, and if something bad happens or they decide to do something, you really have no power over that. So now we talk about what is Web 3. So in Web 3, we add another construct of money. So information, people, and money. So the idea is that there are transactions that can be utilized natively on Web 3 space without having to rely on the company, the platform, or to use some kind of mechanism to capture how you're going to pay them or how you can extract money. The idea behind Web3 is that there's a built-in payment structure that can be utilized by anybody that has access. So the real big thing is here about decentralization, permissionless, and payments. I don't need to sign up for a Gmail account to access your service. I have a crypto wallet, I can access your service. There's no central authority. All the blockchain is really keeping track of everything. So it's really about, if there was no central authority, how would we communicate, create systems with that? And that's what Web3 blockchain is really set out to do. The pain points, of course, is user experience. So I mentioned if there's a platform, a company, they can really own the end-to-end experience and make it a very nice, easy, glossy user onboarding. With Web3, it's very hard with so many disjoint systems. You got to have this ledger over here. You have to get your wallet over here. There's a lot of extra steps you have to do. If you want to transfer from one coin to another coin, you have to go to some third-party swap system to swap your coin and pay And then everything costs a transaction cost. So people might have heard of gas fees or transaction fees. There's so many fees involved with the Web3 architecture because it's designed to be no central authority holds everything. You're paying into the system, but this leaves a poor user experience than if I'm a centralized platform that can control the end-to-end experience. So I found a nice way to kind of summarize Web 1 to Web 3, where Web 1 would companies create content, the companies earn money. Web 2, that people create content and the companies earn money. And the idea of Web 3 is people create content and people earn money. Since there's no central platform that's taking the entire system, any content that you create, I'm sure if people have heard of NFTs, they can control that content, they can get the money from that instead of a big provider taking the lion's share of the revenue. Before we move on, any questions about kind of the intro of Web 1 to Web 3?
Yeah, I got a quick one. What's the central authority in Web 2? Is that more of the login agents when you log in with Google, Facebook, or payment methods?
Yes. So I mentioned, like, if I want to get a ride on Uber, like I have to use the Uber app. I have to use their system. If they only accept certain credit cards, I have to use that. So, but if there was like a decentralized Uber, there's nobody that's really controlling that. You just, hey, I want to ride here, and then somebody on the platform would get that. So when you think of these Web 2 systems, think of the big companies that control that experience. So Airbnb, Facebook, Uber, etc. They own the end-to-end infrastructure, and you're plugging into that system.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Read the chat. All right. No questions, so I'll move on. I really want to focus on, like, how does one build a Web3 application? So development from there's kind of this high level, what is Web3, what are these systems, but then when you think about how to actually build an app on that. So that's, I really like focusing on building applications. I want to get into the code, so I'm gonna talk about what I did. So in the Web3 ecosystem, there's a concept of identity. So I mentioned in Web2, you have like sign with Gmail or this. In Web3, the idea is you have a wallet. MetaMask is a popular thing. That's your identity. That's how you access the Web3 ecosystem. A lot of the Web3 apps utilize some of these Web2 technologies. So there's an HTML page, there's a mobile page. So they might have a backend database. So the Web3 apps are still using Web2, but not everything is completely Web3. So you have to think of the trade-off. What should be on a blockchain versus what should I control on my database or server? So there are things to think about there. There's decentralized storage. So in typical storage solutions, you're probably using Amazon S3 if you're in the AWS ecosystem, and you put an HTML file there or object there. There's decentralized versions of that. IPFS is the most popular one, where it's just universal storage where you can just put files there, but it's public. So there's some extra things you got to think about that. And then the blockchain is where the transactions happen when you want to, the native payments, the native state, and Solidity is probably a popular framework to develop. We call it Ethereum virtual machine EVM applications, and that's really the blockchain aspect when you think of Web3 or any type of cryptocurrency. The blockchain is the key part. So for me, I needed to think about, thought of an idea. I called this idea called Git Gallery, which is basically turn your GitHub commits into NFTs. So I would want to understand how can I build an application that utilizes all these different technologies. So for me, I always thought art is code. So how about I just transform my code into actual art? So that was kind of the gist behind that. So to kind of break down what happened, smart contracts are kind of the bread and butter when you think of blockchain applications. So think of it as a mutable program that leaves a unique transaction hash each time code is executed. So I like to think of it as a vending machine. So if I put in money to a vending machine, it's going to give me some type of product back. So in a smart contract, I'm going to put in some type of a gas fee, and it's going to execute some type of code. So that's one way to think of a smart contract. Deployed vending machine that's not going to change once it's deployed. And it's an example of a Solidity code. So developing a smart contract. This is a very simple smart contract. Most smart contracts that are developed import from this company called Open Zeppelin. They do a lot of contract development and secure. So most of the time when you're looking at Solidity code, they're importing a lot of different statements, and they just kind of change some of the boilerplate parameters. So this one's very simple. I'm just making a new smart contract with my get NFT. It has this mint function. So if I want to mint a new NFT, it calls that function. And then all the tokens have this space URI, which points to the data for my NFT. So very simple, has two functions. And this is kind of the great hello world, the understanding how to actually build a smart contract. And then when you actually want to deploy the smart contract, it has to be compiled. So these tools are Truffle and Infura. Truffle basically compiles the actual Solidity code into something that can be deployed on the blockchain. And Infura is just a way to take that compiled code and put it to a public blockchain. So similar if you're like making a Java file, you make a jar file from that, and then you deploy it somewhere, or Node.js or TypeScript, you compile that and it gets pushed somewhere. Same type of concept. These are just the blockchain equivalents for that. And then to deploy it, you have a deployment function. So think of an infrastructure as code. Truffle allows you to deploy to different blockchains. There's a concept called testnet. So if I want to test my code before actually paying real Ethereum or Polygon or whatever blockchain I'm using, they have testnets you can try it for. You just change your parameter, it puts it to the test network or the main network. So typical infrastructure as code concept. So it's great from coming from kind of that DevOps background where I understand these concepts, and then okay, the similar things map from the blockchain. And this is just another sample code that's just after the code gets deployed, what do you want to do with this? This is very, very simple. It's all written in JavaScript, which is nice. So coming from a JavaScript background, you kind of natively understand, oh, I'm just getting my contract when it exports, this is how much gas I want to pay maximum when my thing is deployed. I'm doing nothing, but sometimes you might want to do other functions, but this is kind of how a simple hello world, how do I deploy smart contracts? And then when a smart contract compiled, generates this something called an application binary interface, ABI, which is basically a giant JSON file that allows me to call functions from that smart contract in other languages. So if I have a backend Node.js API or Python API and I want to call the functions for my smart contracts as I'm building an application, I need to use the ABI to actually translate to the blockchain network. Hey, I want to call function mint when this API is called, and the ABI is going to help me do that. And then the blockchains have this concept of a scan tool where you can, when people say, oh, the blockchain, you can see all the transactions. The scan tool allows you to see everything that happens on the blockchain. So when you deploy your contract, you get a transaction hash, you see who created it, what the contract is, what the value cost to deploy that. So very useful for actually tracking what's happening. So to recap about smart contract development, it's really about you use Solidity, import from Open Zeppelin. They develop a lot of secure contracts, compile the code of Truffle, deploy the code to network with Infura. You save that ABI so you can build an application for that. And you can view the contract with the scan tool. So any questions before I move on? See, what is NFT, non-fungible token? So I want to explain that. Yeah, basically NFTs for smart contract. Let's see. Be careful of crash reports when running Truffle. It can dump all your environment variables in the crash record. Yeah, that's true. When you're deploying, developing.
I had that happen.
Gotta be careful.
I had that happen, and I pushed to a public repo, and instantly I lost half an Ethereum.
Yeah.
And then, and once that wallet was compromised, I moved everything else out of it. But yesterday, when they did the ENS airdrop, that old wallet qualified for 35 ENS, and I was gonna go and send some ETH over to it and claim it, and they sent $180 to that wallet and claimed it before I got to it.
Wow. So yeah, always be careful when pushing things public repos. Yes. Good. Polygon and Ethereum are two different blockchains. Oh yeah, so Polygon is what's called a layer 2 blockchain, which sits on top of Ethereum. And I used it for my project because of the gas fees are very cheap compared to traditional Ethereum. So for example, we can see my transaction fee for when I deployed my contract was 0.009 Matic, and one Matic at that time was 1.08. So it was probably like less than a penny to deploy my contract. If I used Ethereum, that could have been like $50, $60, $100. So not really.
Probably more like $4,000.
What about the environmental cost of using these blockchains? Yeah, that's a big topic. People always talk about. Like the idea is the blockchain are using something called proof of work, which is just basically doing a lot of calculations to determine what block gets mined. The idea is these blockchains are moving to a proof of stake, which is more environmentally friendly because it's not doing all this unnecessary calculations to actually understand who's doing the transactions. So, but it's taking time to move there, but that is the goal because it is a big concern. So it is this movement towards a more environmentally friendly ecosystem, and that's really the end goal. So people on blockchain apps don't want to just destroy the environment as well. So they are moving towards that, but it is taking time. But there are definitely plans in place for that. How do you bridge Polygon and ETH? Someone posted that. Yeah, there's so many different ways to change the transfer stuff. I mentioned that like one of the pain points of Web3, you got to use like these bridges and swaps to trade money or wrap something as WETH, like all this annoying stuff that has to go through, which is why I feel adoption is a bit harder. But once the user experience is better, I can feel that the Web3 would take off. But that's definitely one of the pain points. Build with one code. Yeah, so if the Solidity contract compiles to EVM, so if you have an EVM-based blockchain like Ethereum or Polygon, you can use the same code. So in this script here, I just have Polygon and then Polygon mainnet, but I could have also the Ethereum mainnet. I can have the Ethereum testnet as well using the same code. So as long as an EVM compatible blockchain, I can use the same code deployed to all those blockchains with the same script. So that's really a big advantage. If I was using another blockchain like Solana, that's not EVM compatible. So I couldn't use the same code for that. So that's one of the trade-offs you have to think about when you're deploying blockchain applications. All right, so let me continue. Minting an NFT. So people have heard about NFTs. We already had a question what an NFT is. Basically, an NFT is an object on a smart contract that's tied to a JSON metadata file. So in this example here, we have this octopus and it has different stats. It has a name. This is tied to a contract. So a contract I deployed, and it's looking at for this example, maybe the base URI points to these JSON files, and this JSON file defines all of the actual stats to that user, that NFT item. So this is an example of my Git gallery example. I have like who signed it, who the committer is, what the repo name is, when the commit date happened, the description. So my API is grabbing all the information from my Git commit and then making a JSON file, and I take a screenshot of the file to actually get the image, and then I use the API to actually push to say, okay, mint my token, mint to the smart contract. So I have the JSON data, I deploy the JSON data to a file storage, and I say, my Python code, go ahead and mint the NFT using that code that I pushed. And this is an example of Python code that basically I'm using the ABI, this code NFT is actually the ABI function. I'm calling the mint function. I pass in the URI that I uploaded my JSON file to, the address I want to mint it to, sign the transaction, get that, wait for the hash of the transaction to happen, and then I basically get, okay, it's happened, and then I can get the actual token ID from that. So very simple boilerplate code. I use Python because I'm more familiar with Python, but there are definitely JavaScript Node.js function to do this exact same framework. And then you get a go to the Polygon scan. You can see the transactions that happened. Voila! And you see how cheap it is. 0.002 Matic to mint my token. If that was Ethereum, it could have been on $50, $60, $70 if it's do a simple mint like that. So that's one of the advantages of using these layer 2 applications like Polygon. And then my NFT gets minted. So this is an example of my Git NFT, one of my GitHub commits. So kind of the recap, create the NFT metadata, construct the transaction, use the ABI, wait for the transaction hash, and voila, NFT is minted. So any questions before I move on? No questions? All right, so big question, how can we interact with blockchain from an actual website? So that's a big thing. So tools to use are MetaMask. I mentioned that's your identity, and Ethers.js is a JavaScript framework that allows you to interact with blockchain applications from a front-end application. So if you've ever been to a Web3 site, most of the time we'll see like this MetaMask pop up. What it's really doing with this window.ethereum is checking if the browser has MetaMask installed. And if it has MetaMask installed, it'll ask you to say, oh, sign in to MetaMask, let me get your account information. If window.ethereum will fail, if that browser does not have MetaMask or wallet installed, so you get that error from the user, they don't have MetaMask. And most of the time, they'll ask you to sign a message. So for my applications, I want you to verify that this person is actually signing into my website. So I would say, get the signatures, and you'll see a pop-up that says, I'm signing into this application. So that's the sign message function. So basically it looks like this, like you're signing into this, sign into this gallery, accept that you're signing in. This is your identity. So this is replacing login with Gmail or Auth0 or any other framework that's doing identity. Your wallet is your identity, and you're confirming that. So that's the big takeaway from that. So let's recap. MetaMask is your identity. Ethers.js has a lot of different tools to use, or Web3.js. Sign message is a very common framework, so I use that. And then once you pass in that information, you can pass it into your backend API to do all the cool stuff as showed before. To kind of highlight what the entire app looks like, you sign in, Git gallery, I pass in the data to my Python code. It stores the metadata in IPFS, and then it mints the token to the blockchain, and then I get back my user interface. I minted my token. That's kind of how my Git gallery application works end to end. And best way to understand it is a sheet. So let's do a demo. Go here. Now this is Git gallery, turn your code to NFT. I want to mint my code, so I will mint my code. I have a GitHub commit here. The idea is I just copy my GitHub commit URL. Here's that pop-up. You want to actually commit this. Mint successful. Oh, there it is. And then we can look at a transaction link. So it takes time. So that's one of the things about blockchain. It's not instantaneous. So this might take some time for the the actual transaction to happen, but it's on the Polygon scan, so it'll eventually pass at some point. And the idea is now I can look at an older one. Basically, this is how it would look like. Here's my GitHub commit, and I'll leave the item there. So really very simple process. Very simple. A lot of code to this basically minted NFT there, but that was really the end-to-end process. I got my URL, verified it, and then voila, transaction happened. So that's like some questions on kind of how that end-to-end workflow worked. Let's see. What resources did you lose when learning about programming Web3? I'm a JS developer stuck on Web2. Yeah, I found a lot of cool resources. I can post some. That I found. Let's see. This person on Twitter that's posted a lot of cool stuff. Not there. I've seen some of his content and it's really helpful. Where's the link? All right, just posted this. So read through this. This was a good starting point. Like I said, there is a lot of content. Sometimes it's annoying when you're looking at stuff because you'll find content from 5 years ago too. So you gotta really dig through and understand some of the stuff, and you're gonna stumble along the way, but that's part of the process. Why bother with minting code when the cost including is significant? Yeah, so there's this idea of ownership. So you would hear, I'm sure some people have heard of like right-click save, like why should I care about NFT? I can just save this. People really value that concept of ownership, that this is made from somebody else. Or so I like to think of it as a signed baseball card. Like I can get a baseball card, doesn't matter, but if it was signed by Michael Jordan, that adds value to it. So it's kind of the same concept. If somebody minted like the first curl, I use curl all the time. The developer of curl made that NFT of his first commit. Someone might be willing to pay for that. Just how somebody paid $5 million for Tim Berners-Lee's HTML code of the web browser. So it's really, some people have zero care. I don't care that somebody signed it, has no value to me. And that's fine. But the other people that are collectors that have value to that, it means something to them. So that's kind of the root of almost any kind of sale thing. It has value if somebody else thinks it has value. So if you don't think it has value, that's fine. No one's forcing you to think it has value, but somebody else does that. What is the file format of this code that's being minted? Yeah, so I mentioned that it's a JSON file. So this is pointing to a JSON file, and I have an image file somewhere. So this is just a JSON file. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything special about this. I don't know if I can see JSON file. But yeah, it's just a JSON file, and then when it's on OpenSea, this is pointing to a JSON file. And I think I showed an example in the PowerPoint. Let's see. Seeing a lot of cool discussions. If anyone wants to talk about anything, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I've got a question that might be easier just to say out loud here. If this were in Web 2, like an application that someone made, like Facebook or something, the idea of minting code or like, submitting your commits, there probably would be something in terms and conditions saying Facebook owns some sort of, they own whatever you're submitting to their site, right? If I post a picture on Facebook, Facebook has some sort of ownership of it. When you are doing it on here, when you're minting these, if I were to create a account with your site, are you minting it and you have the NFT, or is it minting to the person that's registering it because we're using MetaMask? Yeah,
so for my application, you have to be the owner of this commit, and when you are, it mints it to you. So and there's a transaction fee being paid. But since Polygon is so cheap, my backend application actually is pre-filled with Matic and is paying that fee. In other applications, when you like say mint, it'll say like you want to pay X fee, but that's not a good user experience because somebody else you have to pay that fee. So for my application, I wanted to make it as seamless as possible.
Yeah.
So I'm taking that.
So that's a service that you're providing for.
Correct.
Basically, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I've been watching and reading Dabbit for a couple of weeks. I recommend him also. Yeah, he actually came to one of my meetups, so that was nice. I run the blockchain DC meetup, and he spoke at our meetup. So I definitely recommend following him if you're interested in this space as well. Drop his Twitter in the chat. Are wages for developer fees really 100K plus? What does that mean? Developer fees, gas fees? I wouldn't say they're 100K plus, but some Ethereum gas fees can be pretty expensive. There's like a site that keeps track of it. Ethereum average gas fee, yeah. So let's see, average gas fee, November 8, 2021, $133.38. So yeah, expensive. I think Ethereum was at its all-time high yesterday, so everything goes up. So that's why these layer 2 solutions, when I want to build and play around with applications, I gear towards them instead of using kind of the layer 1 Ethereum, which costs very expensive. Love Git Gallery use case. In your opinion, Bender, what can make one JSON file valued at more than another JSON file? Basically, who signs it? Is a Michael Jordan baseball card better than a Kwame Brown baseball or basketball card for any NBA fan? So really about ownership and who signed that. So that's really what gives value. That's saying I put my name on this, I rubber stamped this, it's verifiable by me. So that's really what the goal is. You're right, there is JSON files, there's no inherent value into them, but somebody thinks it has value because I put my foot on it or assigned it. Somebody bought a Bansky painting for 69 million, which is, and none of his other things sold before, and now it has value, now it has a popular artist. Vincent van Gogh is none of his art is important until he died later. So that's really, sometimes people value that name recognition or just names on something. So can I predict who's going to be the next big artist? No, I can't. But someone might enjoy their art, buy it at a cheap price, and maybe they come big later on. So it's a gamble, it's a risk. Who can say? I don't think blockchain is worth the cost, especially if it feels like it's damaging the environment for personal gain. And that's fair. There's definitely environmental problems. I do think the blockchain community understands that, and they are working toward these more eco-friendly solutions. Personal gain, I think one of the big things is this idea of decentralization, no central bank, but sometimes maybe that doesn't help. Like, people say, oh, I don't have a bank account, I don't have a credit card, how can I send money to those people? If I had an Ethereum wallet, I can send money to them. The government's not going to garnish your wages or be corruption. If you go to other states, countries, there is government corruption. They take away the not utilizing money correctly. Web3 could be a way to help against that. Who knows? But that would be one of the points the community will say.
We can feel free to have conversations off of chat as well, because
Yeah, someone wants to jump in. Yeah, please.
Exactly.
I'm like trying to read through things, but if anybody has Any comments, thoughts, questions? Happy to walk through things.
Yeah, my brother called at the same time, so I was just typing. But yeah, proof of stake blockchains are definitely more eco-friendly. There's a lot of blockchains that are actually looking at solving some of the world's environmental problems. For example, there's Clima, which Clima DAO is, basically buying up carbon credits to redistribute around the world. There are environmental friendly things that are absolutely happening in this space.
Yeah, I know. COP 26 is going on, 28, whatever. So there's definitely a lot of heightened awareness of environmental, and blockchain is becoming big. Bitcoin was just the all-time high yesterday, same with Ethereum. So there's definitely noise around that, and that's going to be one of the big things going forward. Is this environmentally friendly? Can this be sustainable? If not, then I expect the prices to plummet when they're higher. But there's definitely a work towards these proof of stake concepts. So
there's also
go ahead.
There's also like an energy web chain, which a lot of people have theorized that may be the start of buying and selling reusable energy in an energy market globally. There are some links that seem to tie it back to Tesla and Twitter and green energy comments that have been made. But that could just all be conspiracy theory.
Yeah, like I said, it's still very early in this Web3 space, so you're going to see a lot of different coins. They're going to be what people call rug pulls or scams, where it looks like it's very promising, and then people will just scam people out of money. That recently happened with the Squid Game coin. There's definitely going to be a lot of hype, and there's going to be a lot of scams, but I think that's universal to any type of new technology. So I think when things cooled off a bit, you will see some better innovation. So right now, there's definitely a sense of frenzy, but that's excitement. So I think Web3 gives us an opportunity to rebuild kind of what we saw with the failures of Web2, of this big centralization. You see all the problems Facebook has now these days. Not to rag on them, but it has changed the name. They're trying to move away. So there's definitely Web2 definitely has hit kind of a plateau, if you will. So I think a lot of new innovations will be happening in this Web3 space.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yep, hear you, Kevin.
So I gave a talk at my last company about digital advertising and how, as more people install ad blockers, it's getting harder and harder to reach the audience. So they're resourcing to other things like, taking our data or spying on us, getting as much information as they can to target the user better. Since so much time and money has gone into this, I do wonder if industries like Google and YouTube, Amazon are just going to stand by and allow us to kind of circumvent them with streaming, something like streaming micropayments. I'm just curious if people have any thoughts on how these industries are getting involved. Are they going to push back on this kind of thing? It seems like a huge amount of revenue that's going to slip away from them as people move to these Web3 solutions.
Yeah, so we're already seeing when Apple introduced your stop app tracking, you saw things like Snapchat lose a lot of money because they weren't able to track people. So that's already happening in the space. So if Apple as a company can dictate that you can't make any more money anymore, that's definitely a big problem. So Web3 kind of takes away that ability from a central company server to kind of control the ecosystem in that manner. So you mentioned Amazon. A lot of Ethereum nodes actually run on AWS already, so they're already part of that ecosystem. So I think these big companies understand that. So, and seeing that Web3 is definitely there is potential, there's future there. How can they really embed themselves in that space and build developers and builders to start building in that and making solutions for those developers that make systems on that. The one big thing is like they're still a central government, and they're going to want to be control their own currency. So I look at how Web3 evolves versus like centralized governments, because governments want to control their currency. We've already seen China has banned cryptocurrencies like 100 times, and they did it again. So that's what I'm more interested in. How is the centralized government's going to play with kind of this decentralized currency? That's the more interesting battle I'm more looking forward to.
Now, I would say on the flip side, if you look at something like the Brave browser, which is then paying you cryptocurrency to show you ads. So we may move into a model where, hey, yeah, you know what, Facebook, you can show me ads, but you're going to pay me for it. And I'm going to be the one that gets the benefit.
Yeah, I actually, I previously worked at a software company. Now I'm working for an advertising company. So this is something I think about a lot. I'm just like, wow, this industry is about to be flipped on its head, because I also use Brave, and it's a totally new concept to me that, I mean, it makes sense that I should be paid for giving you, the company, my visibility, allowing you to show me these ads. I'm paid for my attention.
Yes, the attention economy is really what drove the Web2 companies. So yeah, how can we flip that on its head? And I think that's going to be interesting to see in the next 4 years.
All right, well, if we don't have any questions, is there a way that if people want to reach you, Banjo, with any questions that they come to, or if they start trying any of this and they want to reach out for more resources? There we go.
Yeah, Twitter is the best way to reach out to me. So follow me, message me. If you're a LinkedIn person, I'll post my LinkedIn too. But Twitter would be preferred.
Perfect.